saying he was acting crazy. It seems as though that's now his perception he's trying to give to his supervising officer, when everyone who saw that tape knows for at least 6 minutes, if not more, he wasn't acting crazy, and that's exactly what the problem with the continued use of force is. It's got to drop back down as the threat does.
That was notable. And Chief Ramsey, the other thing notable about Chauvin's communications to his supervisor immediately after the incident, Chauvin notably did not mention that he had placed his knee on Floyd's neck to restrain him for minutes, as the tape shows and as the eyewitnesses. Is that a piece of information that you, for instance, would expect a police officer serving under you to share with you in the aftermath?
Well, I would, but he's trying to cover himself at this point in time. Clearly, when he's talking to his sergeant, the reality of what just took place may not have really hit him yet, because this stuff's on video, it's on audio tape. And so, it doesn't make any sense to try to alter the story when it's right there. And so at that moment, it seems to me like when he's speaking with the sergeant, he's trying to justify a use of force that's simply unjustifiable.
Well, Laura Coates, the other big piece of the testimony today was really multiple accounts and questions about George Floyd's drug use up to this. Even the prosecution, right, discussing with his girlfriend that they were both opioid addicts. She said it very openly, something that he and she struggled with, and also, establishing that he had other problems with drugs, including just 2 months before an emergency trip to the hospital for an overdose from heroin. I wonder, from the defense's perspective here, is that primarily about an attempted character assassination, like calling into questions about the victim here, or is there something else going on here about raising questions about what could have caused his death, right? Or at least a reasonable doubt about what could have caused his death?
It likely is more of the latter, because of course the way people think about opioid abuse and addiction is a different time that we're in now in 2021. The idea of being an addict is not the vilifying factor that perhaps it may have been in character assassination years ago for a defendant or a victim in a crime. And so we've already talked about the characterization of that. And remember, it was the prosecution who fronted this because they want to be able to take the wind out of the sails of any defense argument to say, aha, this is what they don't want you to know. Why didn't they tell you this? If they didn't tell you that, what other things aren't they telling you? But ultimately, this is going to come down to two questions. Number one, whether the use of force sustained over a period of time was reasonable. And number two, whether the kneeling on the neck was a substantial causal factor in his death. Now remember, in Minnesota, Jim, it need not be the sole factor in the death, but it has to be a substantial causal factor. So probably trying to get the groundwork because, hey, we know the knee was on the neck, but he had drugs in his system. That was the one that was a substantial causal factor, not the knee to the neck. They're trying to lay the groundwork now. So far, unsuccessfully.
But Mark O'Mara, these are human stories, right? Juries are made up of, they're a jury of our peers, fellow human beings with emotions. They react to sympathetic witnesses, right? And you saw the accounts there, sometimes tearful, from George Floyd's girlfriend, describing him as a man with a lot of interests and as a loving partner and so on. I just wonder, you've been in the courtroom, right? As a defense attorney, as you watched that today, did you see that as powerful for the prosecution?
I thought it's very, very powerful. I think everything that the prosecution has done so far has been by plan, and it's been effective. Again, this is their best day, right? These last 4 days, and the future couple, because it's their presentation. But I thought the idea of the way they presented it, first with people who sort of knew George Floyd a little bit, then gave the scene, and now from the girlfriend, I think it was very, very powerful, because exactly what they want to do is to personalize that victim. And I do think that the defense has to be more careful. I think the idea of sort of going after these witnesses with almost a shotgun approach, they need to be more focused on what their defense really is. If they're going to attack, cause of death, do it, but leave the witnesses, like even the girlfriend, out of the crosshairs.
Yeah, I get that point, because you don't want to antagonize. Chief Ramsey, from your perspective, do you believe that Derek Chauvin owes it not just to Floyd's family, citizens of Minnesota, but
I'm going to rewind that line. And I already watched this earlier.
Careful. I think the idea of sort of going after these witnesses with almost a shotgun approach, I think they need to be more focused on what their defense really is. If they're going to attack, cause of death, do it, but leave the witnesses, like even the girlfriend, out of the crosshairs.
Yeah, I get that point because you don't want to antagonize. Chief Ramsey, from your perspective, do you believe that Derek Chauvin owes it not just to Floyd's family, citizens of Minnesota, but also to the law enforcement community to take the stand at some point in this trial and testify? Do you believe that?
I don't know. I think he'll vote based on whatever his attorney tells him to do. So whether he testifies or not, I really don't know. I'd personally be surprised if he did under the circumstances. But if I could mention just one thing that I thought was curious, and that's when the defense brought up the issue of the critical decision-making model that's used in police training regarding use of force. It really is replacing the old use of force continuum that we used to use. And the use of force, or rather the critical decision-making model, is one that really forces officers to constantly reassess their actions based on the changed behavior of the suspect, which could either escalate or de-escalate, obviously. But you have to constantly reassess. Just because force was justified at one point doesn't mean it's justified later, because you have to reassess. What's he doing? What's the threat? And if the threat's not there, stop.
Yeah, it's a great point, and that goes back to where we started, right? The sergeant, Chauvin sergeant, saying it should have stopped because Floyd was no longer resisting. Listen, Charles Ramsey, Mark O'Mara, Laura Coates, thanks to have you. Good having you again on tonight.
You're welcome.
Coming up next, the Congresswoman hoping to reform policing and redeem justice in the wake of this tragedy. Sheila Jackson Lee, she's going to join us. Later, as if the sex trafficking allegations and blackmail claims were not enough, there is yet more breaking news. Shocking development.
Told you he was a piece of shit. Sorry for the language, but
Yes! Hey, Ava, how's my bracket looking?
This is Gary. I invested in Invesco QQQ, a fund that invests in the innovations of the NASDAQ 100, like this artificially intelligent home system.
Become an agent of innovation with Invesco QQQ.
It's hard to believe that Mint Mobile can be good at just $15 a month. So, as Mint's new owner, I brought in one of our first and oldest customers, Wasim McNavy. Welcome to Mint, Ryan. So you've had Mint for years. Any issues? No, the service has been great. And under my ownership, it's going to get even better. Oh, no idea. Still $15 a month, though, right? Yep. How about Taco Wednesday? Nobody's done that before.
Not everybody wants the same thing. That's why I go with Liberty Mutual. They customize my car insurance, so I only pay for what I need. Because I do things a bit different. What, Teddy Bears? What, Teddy Bears here?
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty. New projects means new project managers. You need to hire.
I mean,
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed,
boy, I'm really losing it today.
Claim your 7
Hi, this is a sample comment. Hover over it or tap on it to see your options. Try presenting it on screen. Like, that's not new, but like, I thought, there's a new comment.
Right, Sky Bob?
Oh my gosh.
Maybe it's time to find a new one. Realtor.com. Lose something? Where's your face mask?
Probably in my car.
somewhere in my kitchen.
He has no idea.
When you need your mask, you want it right where you can find it. Introducing Copperfit Never Lost Face Mask, a new ultra lightweight mask designed with a built-in lanyard that lets you lower your mask and is always right there when you need it.
Sometimes people just walk on you just really quickly, like, where's our mask? And now it's like, oh, okay, you're coming, I'm ready to go.
I like throwing things around, trying to find it, like, wait, 1 second.
I like that it just hangs right off, and then I don't have to worry about losing it, so it's always with me.
Okay, I got my phone, I got my keys. Where's my mask? Oh, it's always with me.
An easy adjustable ear loop design for custom fit and maximum comfort.
I love the adjustable earrings. It doesn't fall off. It's very secure. I don't feel
The straps behind my ears. I've never seen a mask have that.
I know that those straps on the double mask were pulling on my ears. You could see them pulling forward today.
But with this mask, I can breathe in it, and I'm never gonna lose it. It's great.
A triple layer fabric with a durable copper infused outer layer and a soft cotton double inner layer.
This is brilliant. This is now my go-to mask.
All right.
You don't need to be thinking about it. You just need to wear it.
Hello to the viewers and the replay viewers, unless I delete this. What am I looking for? All mail. I'm looking for HAPS emails.
Durable, washable, and reusable. Get the
HAPS,
mask you will never
HAPPS.
Buy Everlast.com for only $19.99 or call 1-800
All right.
7152.
Help us make
Order now for
HAPS
your entire family,
better.
And we'll include 4 lanyard masks for only $19.99.
How would you feel if you could no longer
If you wear
broadcast on
masks, they're gonna
HAPS?
give you Mickey Mouse ears and poke your ears right off your face. You want
Woof woof, how would you feel if you could no longer broadcast on HAPS?
Ask for the original by name.
Woof woof would be very disappointed.
Bath Fitter doesn't just fit your bath. With hundreds of
Reply to this email and someone will get back to you. Did they ask me or Woof Woof? They asked Woof Woof. That's interesting.
With quality that's guaranteed for life, it fits your high standards. Why have over 2 million people welcomed Bath Fitter into their homes? It just fits. Bath Fitter. Call now or visit bathfitter.com to book your free consultation.
We got a fuller picture of George Floyd, the man, in court today in moving testimony from his girlfriend. We're joined now by a congresswoman who shares his Houston, Texas roots, Sheila Jackson Lee, who is spearheading police reform legislation now bearing his name. It's now awaiting action in the Senate. She spoke at Floyd's funeral.
And so I say to George Floyd, it'll be up to us that his purpose and his assignment for the justice of this nation, for the fact that there will never be the brutality faced by a man that says, I can't breathe, and calls to a mama who loved him so. That is the right and call for all of us. And so, as the Lord and the scripture said, when asked, who should I send? The first who said, send me, was George Floyd.
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee joins us now. Congresswoman, thanks so much for taking the time tonight.
Thank you, Jim, for having me this evening.
You, of course, authored the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But first, your reaction as you've watched these first few days of the Derek Chauvin trial. Even, for instance, to see a moment you referenced there at his funeral, him calling for his mother in his final moments.
Well, Jim, I think we want what every American should want as we watch this trial. And when I say that, African Americans, people of goodwill, and that is justice and a recognition that we are a country of law and order. But as I've heard police officers say, they want to go home to their families, and I've added, and we want to go home to ours. This officer, Chauvin, did not allow George Floyd, who was loved by so many, as we have seen in the midst of his death, to go home to his family, whether it was in Minneapolis or whether it was in Houston, Texas, or places beyond. And for that, we believe that Officer Chauvin should be held accountable. I think what we have seen is a block by block building of a story and a physical structure. And I think it's been strong. I believe the prosecutors have carefully laid out with eyewitness testimony, with video. And then I'd highlight yesterday, a very emotional day, showing that the persons that were standing around, who came around, they were not intimidating to the police. They were hurt and they were concerned. I think the prosecutor has laid this out, and I think it's up to the jury to see the facts as clearly as they can and to match that with the law.
Well, we'll be watching. So the bill you named in memory of George Floyd, it passed the House. The history of cases like this, and there's no case exactly like George Floyd, but as you know, we've seen what appeared to be excessive force by police and not punished in a court because the law is written in such a way that it's hard to do. I wonder if you could explain what the bill that you have brought forward does to attempt to change that.
Well, Jim, the power of this bill is the massive support it's gotten and the leadership of the Congressional Black Caucus that worked extensively with all of us on this legislation.
My I need more coffee. My ADD brain did not process that sentence, even though I already watched most of this earlier.
As they can. And then I'd highlight yesterday, a very emotional day, showing that the persons that were standing around, who came around, they were not intimidating to the police. They were hurt and they were concerned. I think the prosecutor has laid this out, and I think it's up to the jury to see the facts as clearly as they can and to match that with the law.
Well, we'll be watching. So the bill you named in memory of George Floyd, it passed the House. The history of cases like this, and there's no case exactly like George Floyd, but as you know, we've seen what appeared to be excessive force by police and not punished in a court because the law is written in such a way that it's hard to do. I wonder if you could explain what the bill that you have brought forward does to attempt to change that.
Well, Jim, the power of this bill is the massive support it's gotten and the leadership of the Congressional Black Caucus that worked extensively with all of us on this legislation. And in this legislation, we are fair. How are we fair? One, we look at the chokehold, which the EMS operators today told us that when they arrived, they thought he was dead. Why? Because Officer Chauvin used excessive force and used, in essence, a chokehold form of action against George Floyd, and he went beyond even the training and actions of Minneapolis police. So we outlaw that, period. We outlaw the no-knock warrant, if you will, that killed Breonna Taylor. We end racial profiling that, in essence, put Sandra Bland in jeopardy. We provide a massive formula for training police officers and ending excessive force. And we also indicate that if by chance you are a victim or your family has lost a loved one, you have an equal chance in the court of law, just as a police officer. You can be fairly heard as a victim, just as the officer can be heard. And I think that is very important.
There was a moment following the depth of the Floyd protests last summer when there was some bipartisan support for some police reform. The two parties did not come to agreement. Do you have Republican support? Have you spoken to Republicans as you lobby for this? Of course, I know the Senate is the next step. Do you think that's possible in this moment?
You know, if anyone is looking at this trial, I hope that their hearts and minds have been as much touched during the trial as it was touched, I believe, in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. And so we may not have vocal Republican support. There are discussions going on, but I tell you what we do have. We have an executive order that Donald Trump wrote, or his administration wrote, that really had a large part of some of the aspects of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I would ask my Republican colleagues who are so enamored with the past president.
Wait, there was a law, what law that the Trump administration wrote?
In the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George.
For this, of course, I know the Senate is the next step. Do you think that's possible in this moment?
You know, if anyone is looking at this trial, I hope that their hearts and minds have been as much touched during the trial as it was touched, I believe, in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. And so we may not have vocal Republican support. There are discussions going on, but I tell you what we do have. We have an executive order that Donald Trump wrote, or his administration wrote, that really had a large part of some of the aspects of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I would ask my Republican colleagues who are so enamored with the past president, whether or not now they reject those elements that they were willing to support in an executive order. The legislation that has been promoted by our friend, Senator Scott, is not where it needs to be. It's not strong. It doesn't have the strength that we need. But the table, the chairs are still there, Jim. And I believe at this time in history, it will be good for America if we can resolve these issues and have a coming together to recognize that This nation is a nation of law and order, but it is also a nation of humanity and compassion and justice. And that's what the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act represents.
We'll be watching. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up next this hour, a story that still has more remarkable, even alarming twists to it. New allegations in a federal investigation involving Republican Firebrand and Congressman Matt Gaetz. Details, there are a lot of them, coming up.
Hi, Sanjay. In an unprecedented event.
I'm rewinding that last thing that Sheila Jackson Lee said.
That we can resolve these issues and have a coming together to recognize that this nation is a nation of law and order, but it is also a nation of humanity and compassion and justice. And that's what the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act represents.
We'll be watching. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up next this hour, a story that still has more remarkable, even alarming twists to it. New allegations in a federal investigation involving Republican Firebrand and Congressman Matt Gaetz. Details, there are a lot of them, coming up.
Firebrand? What does that even mean?
In an unprecedented event, the leaders of the war on COVID break their silence. What they saw.
That wasn't lying in the sand.
What they believed.
I could use the word cover up. Were you threatened?
And what's next.
There will be another pandemic. Guaranteed.
CNN special report, COVID war. The pandemic doctors speak out. Tomorrow at 8.
We've saved our money, and now we get to spend it our way.
But we worry if we have enough to last.
For retirement planning, investment advice, and more, look for a CFP professional. CFP professionals can help you craft a complete financial plan that gives you confidence today and tomorrow. Find your CFP professional at letsmakeaplan.org.
Our Confident Forever plan is possible with a CFP professional.
Hi guys, check out this over here.
What'd you do?
Tell me how you did it.
Yeah.
If you want to still look at who's broadcasting on Periscope, go to Periscope and you open the app. And you see Periscope saying goodbye.
I was at a
Then turn on airplane mode and close the app. Then open the app again.
My matchmaker was awesome. She asked me a lot of questions that were driven to get to know me.
Wait, that didn't work.
with over 25 years of experience.
Okay, put on airplane mode, close the app, then open the app.
So I love working with my matchmaker. I would give feedback after every date.
I'm a busy man.
Then turn off airplane mode. And let's see who's broadcasting on Periscope, even though it ended yesterday. On the map, you can't go live from Periscope, but you can go live from HAPS and the Periscope Studio, I think it's called. Okay, let's see. The list, the map. There's nothing on the map.
It's just lunch, but imagine the
Okay, but the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. They're all live on Periscope right now. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 30, 40. Do I need to keep counting? Let's see if it shows me when I go to my feed. I'm live. SJ's live drawing something. Resurgent of Joey Giggles is live. Jim in Chicagoland is talking to Louise, Poppy, and who else is on there? Jim in Chicagoland, Carrie Long. All right. Donna Melanson is live. Vaughn is live. Rollins Martin. All live on Periscope right now. What does my title say? Does it say follow me on HAPS? Subscribe at HAPS. If they subscribe at HAPS, Does that give me the coins if they subscribe on that link? Hello, there's one person. Is that me or someone else? All right. The link's in my bio. Let me see. Where's my bio? I can't even see what the rest of that says. Haps TV. It doesn't have the invite word in there, but does it still work if it without the invite?
Tonight, a series of developments, one simply more shocking than the next, in what sources say is an ongoing federal investigation into Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, a staunch defender of former president and a favor of the hard right. CNN's Paula Reed is with us now for the latest. And Paula, it was hard to keep track of all the developments in this. Tell us what more we learned today.
Good evening. Well, Jim, multiple sources tell CNN Congressman Gaetz showed other lawmakers photos and videos of nude women he claimed to have slept with. One source said Gaetz shared these images on his phone while on the floor of the House.
Impressive,
Another
huh?
source said it was a point of pride for Gaetz. Now, there is no evidence the Justice Department is looking into this issue or that these are photos of minors. His office so far, though, hasn't responded at all to our reporting. But all of this comes as CNN is learning new details about the scope of an entirely separate criminal investigation into alleged sexual misconduct by Gaetz.
Tonight, new details on the sex trafficking investigation into Representative Matt Gaetz. CNN has learned prosecutors are looking into a relationship with a woman that began when she was just 17, and whether his involvement with other young women broke sex trafficking and prostitution laws, according to two sources briefed on the matter. Those sources say investigators are also pursuing allegations that Gaetz may have used cash and drugs in his dealings with young women. And they've also looked at whether any federal campaign money was involved in paying for travel and expenses. An attorney for Gaetz declined to comment. Gaetz has previously denied any wrongdoing.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. That is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case.
Sources now telling CNN the investigation began as part of a broader probe into trafficking allegations of this man, Joel Greenberg. Two sources familiar with the matter tell CNN that in a meeting last year, federal investigators were told by a witness that Gaetz was seen with Greenberg on an internal office surveillance system looking through driver's licenses on a weekend evening in 2019. Greenberg had access to the surrendered licenses as head of the tax collector's office. There's no indication that the licenses seen handled on the video were used for illegal purposes, but according to the court documents, Greenberg allegedly used the surrendered licenses to create fake IDs. Greenberg has entered a plea of not guilty. Attorneys for Greenberg and Gaetz had no comment.
Of course they did.
CNN has learned former Attorney General Bill Barr received multiple briefings while he was in office on the sex trafficking investigation into Gaetz. Barr did not take issue with the investigation, which began in the final months of the Trump administration. Also, CNN has learned that Fox News host Tucker Carlson was angered at the congressman's attempt to rope him into the scandal. According to a source familiar with the matter, Carlson was livid.
You and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there, and I brought a friend of mine. You'll remember her. And she was actually threatened by the FBI.
I don't remember the woman you're speaking of or the context at all, honestly.
Carlson distanced himself afterwards.
That was one of the weirdest interviews I've ever conducted.
Gaetz tried to distract from the allegations by connecting the criminal investigation to a separate alleged extortion plot against him.
So there are a series of allegations here, almost hard to keep track of. But this extortion claim, and we should be clear about this, this does not relate to the original investigation. This relates to the information about that investigation existing. But Gaetz still claiming that somehow exonerates him. That doesn't hold water, does it?
Exactly. CNN has learned they are two entirely separate cases. We have obtained documents that appear to corroborate that someone with seemingly no direct connection to the sex trafficking case offered to make the lawmakers' legal troubles go away in exchange for money. We've also obtained emails that confirm Gaetz' father is cooperating with the government to investigate that effort. But it's important to note, as you pointed out, Gates was a staunch supporter of former President Trump, but this sex trafficking investigation began in the final months of the Trump administration. And with his political future on the line, Gates is trying to conflate the two cases, reframing himself as the victim and distancing himself from the seriousness of the allegations he faces.
And under Bill Barr. And Bill Barr got briefed on this investigation. Paula Reed, thanks so much for your reporting. Well, many late-breaking developments. Some perspective now from Preet Bharara. He's a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York and a CNN senior legal analyst. Preet, it's great to have you on. I was trying to keep a running tab of all the alleged wrongdoing here because there's the idea of a sexual relationship with an underage girl, trafficking, misuse of campaign funds in some sort of involvement with these young women, fake IDs, a fake ID scheme.
He's a piece of work.
Prostitution, allegations of use of drugs. I mean, that's a long list. Can you help us prioritize those, or is any one more serious than the other?
The underage girl.
They're all pretty serious, and I think you have a good tab on it, Jim. I think what will really matter is which things can be proved. I mean, at this point, you have a lot of reporting. Some of it seems to be credible reporting. I think one of the biggest problems that Matt Gaetz faces, as was alluded to in the report, is that there's a person who's already under indictment for sex trafficking and other charges, Joel Greenberg, and I haven't seen any reporting to this effect, but you have to, wonder whether or not this person, who is facing lengthy prison time, potentially if convicted, has flipped, has become a cooperating witness against Congressman Matt Gaetz. That means then that if he takes that position, becomes a cooperating witness, that he's in a position to give very powerful evidence to the government to bring charges against Matt Gaetz relating to the stuff that he's involved in. So I think when you try to think of where there's most jeopardy, I don't necessarily look at which potential crime carries the longest prison sentence, which particular crime carries the most potential evidence in the form of cooperating witness testimony or other things.
Understood. And listen, as you know, prosecutors, they look for cooperators. It helps them build their case. Help me understand the seriousness of an investigation like this. And we should know it's an investigation. Nothing has been charged yet. Perhaps you don't find sufficient evidence, but it's been going on for a number of months. And by the way, it started under Bill Barr in the Trump administration, despite the fact that Gaetz, a Trump ally, and Barr was briefed on it. Given that, and given that the investigation to CNN's reporting continues, how serious does it make that investigation?
I think it's quite serious. It's interesting to note that all this information is coming to light now. I'm not sure why there are leaks going on. There was the case that my own office oversaw a few years ago that had far-reaching implications in another regard, but the case against Congressman Anthony Weiner was a serious one and involved misconduct with respect to a minor. These are cases that the Department of Justice takes very seriously, both because it involves minors and also because the targets of the investigation are people who have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution and are supposed to be beyond reproach. So I think they take it seriously. I think they also want to make sure that they get everything right. You don't accuse a sitting member of Congress unless you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. And I think that's what they're going to be doing here. And a few months is not a long time in connection with this kind of thing. And it may be the case, as you point out with your long litany of potential investigations, that they want to square away lots of different things before they decide what they want to do with respect to charging.
Understood. In the midst of this claim by Congressman Gaetz that his family was the victim of an extortion attempt, and again, I always note this when we bring this up, not in relation to the target of this investigation itself, but it seems the information that it exists. What do you make of that? I mean, clearly that is being investigated. That's CNN's reporting. Surprising to you? Bizarre to you?
Yes, it's all bizarre. I mean, I tweeted the other night when Matt Gaetz made his statements, and this is something that used to be my bread and butter. It's in the heartland of what I understand, criminal investigations and accusations made by people who are under investigation. And I said something like, I don't even understand what's going on here. It's very bizarre. And you say, I think correctly, based on what we know, those two things are unrelated. But it's obviously in the interest of somebody who's being investigated to connect them to each other, to, as Paul Reed said, cast himself as the victim. And he keeps using the phraseology that he and his family are being extorted by a former Department of Justice official, making it sound like this person was at the Department of Justice, just a few weeks ago and had something to do with the underlying investigation. That's not true. This person was a former member of the Justice Department and has been gone for 2 decades, is my understanding. So it can be simultaneously true that Matt Gaetz is being investigated for serious sex trafficking conduct, and separate from that, someone is trying to extort him based on the fact that that's happening. It's unusual, but it happens, but they're separate.
Mm-hmm. And we should note that former Justice Department official does deny that allegation. Preet Bharara will continue to dig. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, as the pace of vaccinations keeps rising around the country, it's great news. One question remains. How long will the vaccine's protection last? We do have new information on that. We'll bring it to you when we come back.
At least 6 months for Pfizer because they've only done a study of it for 6 months.
You have reached your destination.
They said it's a floor and not a ceiling. I'm playing the farm game on Up Live, but I'm not broadcasting at the same time because I'm not allowed.
The Subaru Outback. Dog tested, dog approved.
The Harry's razor is not the same. Our razors have 5 German-engineered blades designed to stay sharp, so your each
All
shave
right.
is as smooth as your first.
That's good enough on that farm. Let me go check the other farm.
Available in store at harrys.com.
It was a life-changing moment.
How are the 64 of you doing this evening, and where are you tuning in from? What time is it? 9:45.
Like never before. Get started
Excuse
with
me.
Ancestry.com.
Imagine being able to planet. Siegel just
I got nowhere. This helped me deal with that frustration. Things changed when I tried ZipRecruiter because it works like a free personal recruiter. ZipRecruiter sent me great jobs. I applied with a click. Some companies even invited me to apply. I started a new job last week. This still helps.
Go to ZipRecruiter.com and put ZipRecruiter to work for you.
To truly master cold food, one must have a quiet mind. We're going to find your killer. I won't sleep until she pays. Shall we begin? A lot has happened since you've been gone. Kung Fu.
397. 93,000 more for this farm. All right. Is there anything I can plant that doesn't cost that much?
You're always on. I got this great shampoo you should try.
Yeah, you look good.
Of course I do, Neil. I'm Kevin Hart.
I need 3,000.
So much more. Chase, make more of what you
This one will give me what?
Taking Xyzal at night relieves allergies while you sleep.
1980.
Plus, it looks faster.
That'll give me like almost 4,000. But how much did it cost? Oh, it didn't cost anything because it was in my
Only your locally owned
free
Cupcake
items.
dealer has genuine parts.
How about that one?
accessories, trained service.
So maybe in an hour we
and
can
the wide
harvest.
selection of
We can
industry-leading
upgrade that farm item.
We're here for you whenever you need us, with expert service and support to keep your equipment running at peak performance for years to come. And with
Or
great
maybe
deals
not
available,
because I just
there's
bought
never
another
been a better
treasure
time to
chest.
buy from your local Cub Cadet dealer. To find a dealer near you, visit CubCadetDealers.com.
I'm Omar Jimenez in Minneapolis, and this is CNN.
Treasure
Closed
chest.
captioning brought to you by 1-800-PET-MEDS. Call or visit petmeds.com to save big today.
Or maybe I can get coins from these other things.
For the same medications as the vet, but for less, with fast free shipping.
Treasure chest. So how many more do I need? I need.
Well, the drug maker Pfizer today
Now I need
says an ongoing
20,000.
phase 3 trial of its coronavirus vaccine confirms the vaccine's protection lasts at least, that's key, at least 6 months after the second dose. This is Dr. Anthony Fauci. Not only agreed with that, but says tonight the protection is likely to last longer. All the while, there are worries about the rise in overall new infections around the nation. Joining me now is Dr. Lena Wen. She's a CNN medical analyst, former health commissioner for the city of Baltimore. She's also the author of a forthcoming book, Lifelines, A Doctor's Journey in the Fight for Public Health. It's now available for pre-order. You'll want to read it. Dr. Wen, we should also note, also a participant in the Johnson & Johnson trial for the vaccine. She received a placebo. I want to ask you about that, Dr. Wen, but first let's talk about this Pfizer data here. At least 6 months. Should we look at that as a baseline number, though? Because the fact is, that's as much data as we have at this point, because the vaccine's only been around and tested for 6 months. Is that the right way to look at this?
Yep.
That's exactly right, Jim. So this is the floor, definitely not the ceiling.
See?
Most likely, the protection that the vaccine will provide will be years even, but we just don't know that. And I do think that there's a possibility that we may need to get a booster shot, maybe booster shots that target new emerging variants. But I think that's a small price to pay, given that we now have these safe and very effective vaccines that are out there.
Which is not unlike other vaccines, where you do get boosters after the fact to continue the protection. Okay, as this is happening, and I always like to, and you and I talk all the time about the pandemic, and I like to accentuate the positive, because there is a lot of positive news, and more people are getting vaccinated, and I got vaccinated, and everybody's happy. But infections are rising because people are just kind of giving up, right?
Everybody
In a lot
isn't
of
happy.
places. Tell us how concerned you are about that, and what your advice to people would be.
I am very worried that we are on the precipice of a fourth surge here, and we're seeing virus hotspots emerging in different parts of the country, and we're seeing that the population of people getting sick are actually skewing younger, and in a way that's good. It means that the older people who have been vaccinated first, that they are well protected. But I am very concerned about this trend that we're seeing, and my advice for people is to hang in there. Please wait at least until you're fully vaccinated before you're traveling, before you're engaging in higher risk activities. Know that when you become vaccinated, the activities that were once higher risk are now going to be lower risk. And so just wait until then.
Yeah, don't be the last person to get infected, right? I mean, it's almost as simple as that. All right, as I mentioned at the top, you were a participant in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine trial. You actually found out that you received a placebo, because that's the way these things work. You know, half the people don't actually get the vaccine, but you did get the actual vaccine yesterday morning. For folks at home who haven't been vaccinated yet, how are you feeling? What are the effects?
I actually feel just fine, Jim. So I was pretty convinced actually that I had gotten the vaccine before. So I was I'm still in the trial, but a part of the trial that I was in was the 2-dose Johnson & Johnson trial to see if 2 doses of the vaccine will provide better protection than 1 dose. And so I received 2 doses of what turned out to be placebo. And then I found out that I actually got the placebo, and so I had the opportunity to get the Johnson & Johnson 1 dose. So I'm now in the 1 dose part of the trial to compare that to 2 doses. I have a mildly sore arm. Maybe I was a little bit more tired last night. I feel fine, and I actually feel just really grateful that I am protected myself, and also that this brings us a little bit closer to getting more people protected in the country.
Exactly, and that's same for me. I have the Pfizer one, and I have a little soreness in the arm, but otherwise feel like my old self. Dr. Lena Wen, thanks very much to you.
You too.
Coming up next, how Florida Republicans are responding to protests surrounding the killing of George Floyd, why critics say it could criminalize what were peaceful demonstrations.
Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance, so you only pay for what you need. Thank you. Hey, no, you only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty. My family and I and the Indianapolis Colts have talked about what causes we really want to get behind. And one very
good for him for supporting mental health
advocates about is mental health awareness. I struggled for a long time, and then I had to go to counseling, and it's okay to not be okay. No, this thing we're going through, life is not perfect. And there's so many times where, you know, you're going to face so many obstacles, and you're going to feel like the world is against you, and you just got to keep fighting. You got to keep fighting no matter what, and just don't ever give up. Kicking the stigma is our commitment to eradicating and getting this environment changed.
One of my favorite supplements is quinoa turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Unlike regular turmeric supplements, Quinoa superior absorption helps me get the full benefits of turmeric. Quinoa is the turmeric brand I trust.
If you have postmenopausal osteoporosis and a high risk for fracture, now might not be the best time to ask yourself, are my bones strong? Life's full of make or break moments. That's why it's so important to help reduce your risk of fracture with Prolia. Only Prolia is proven to help strengthen and protect bones from fracture with one shot every 6 months.
Do not take Prolia if you have low blood calcium, are pregnant, are allergic to it, or take Xgeva. Serious allergic reactions like low blood pressure, trouble breathing, throat tightness, face, lip, or tongue swelling, rash, itching, or hives have happened. Tell your doctor about dental problems, as severe jawbone problems may happen, or new or unusual pain in your hip, groin, or thigh, as unusual thigh bone fractures have occurred. Speak to your doctor before stopping, skipping, or delaying Prolia, as spine and other bone fractures have occurred. Prolia can cause serious side effects, like low blood calcium, serious infections, which could need hospitalization, skin problems, and severe bone, joint, or muscle pain.
Don't wait for a
Why am I watching this ad?
today and ask about Prolia.
Hi, Sanjay. In an unprecedented event, the leaders of the
The COVID doctors special is re-airing tomorrow on CNN. I saw part of it on demand.
COVID war, the pandemic doctors speak out tomorrow at 8.
Okay, who's my next victim?
Comedy Central is counting down the top 100 roast moments of all time during a week-long roast celebration. Hosted and roasted by me, Nikki Glazer.
During your performance, I wish I picked my own ears off.
We're reigniting all the best birds. From this to that to whatever this
You
was.
have the sex appeal of a school bus fire.
All Acclaim Top 100 roast moments tonight at 10 on Comedy Central.
It's gonna burn so good. For a lot of us, pets are our closest confidants. Animals have an outrageous love. They are a big part of the family, and we love them and they love us. We always treat our patients the way that we would want our pets to be treated.
Everyone here is an animal lover and a pet lover.
They get all the same lovey-dovey talk and like all the same cuddles and pets. They stick with us through thick and thin. Pets give us unconditional love.
They make us laugh. They make us cry. They're just part of us.
Dove Lewis, always here, always open.
People versus the Klan on Sunday, April 11th at 9.
As the trial of Derek Chauvin unfolds, Florida Republicans are in the middle of advancing a controversial anti-riot bill. It's a prerogative of Governor Ron DeSantis, and it's his party's answer to last year's Black Lives Matter protests, spawned, of course, by the killing of George Floyd. Critics say it defines riots far too broadly and could end up criminalizing legitimate public protests. 360's Randy Kay has the details.
I definitely think it's unnecessary. I definitely think it's anti-protest, anti-Black Lives Matter, and it's not for the people.
Janine Tinsley is talking about Florida's anti-rioting bill, officially known as HB1. As a peaceful protester here, she's been watching the bill's progress. It passed the House on March 26th after several hours of spirited debate.
76 yeas, 39 nays, Mr. Speaker.
Sure, the bill passes.
And soon the Senate will take it up. If it passes, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is eager to sign it into law.
If you are involved in a violent or disorderly assembly and you harm somebody, if you throw a brick and hit a police officer, you're going to jail.
That tough talk is exactly what has Janine concerned.
It gives police more power to potentially abuse it, for them to define or decide what is a riot.
Critics say the bill so broadly defines a riot that even peaceful protesters may get caught up in arrests. State Attorney Andrew Warren argues the bill criminalizes peaceful protests.
The problem with that is if you have 100 people in protest and 3 of them decide to commit a crime, under this bill, the other 97 are guilty of rioting just for being there.
The bill's co-sponsor, Republican Representative Anthony Sabatini, says that's not the way it's designed.
You're not going to see people who are breaking the law dealt with like as if they were violent protesters.
The bill includes a mandatory 6-month sentence for those convicted of battery on police. It also bans the practice of blocking roadways during protests and prohibits the demolition of memorials or statues. And for people arrested for riot-related offenses, the bill requires they be held in jail without bail until their first court hearing.
These are all scraggly looking, Antifa types. They get their mugshot taken and then they get released. And it's like a carousel. On and on it goes. That's not going to happen here in Florida.
The bill was announced last September, following a summer of nationwide protests in response to the death of George Floyd.
It was George Floyd's death that spawned those instances of behavior, but it's just a matter of time before another political event spawns the same behavior for a different cause.
Sabatini says Florida needs more tools to crack down on violent protesters, but State Attorney Andrew Warren disagrees.
This anti-protest bill is an unconstitutional waste of time. It tears a couple corners off the Constitution by encroaching on free speech and free assembly. It doesn't even help prosecutors. We already have the tools we need to prosecute people who commit rioting.
Some see racial undertones in the bill too.
It targets definitely Black people, people that are, want to change.
Sabatini, the co-sponsor, says the bill doesn't target any specific group.
It is a racially and politically neutral bill, and we're going to keep it that way.
Randy Kay joins us now. Randy, I want to get to the root cause here because were the protests, the Floyd protests in Florida, actually that violent? Therefore,
That's fun. This is amazing. Oh my God, thank you. But fortunately, most of the time, crying starts. The baby's okay.
Don't thank me. Thank Teddy. She's one who never gave up. She stayed with her night after night. I just did what the numbers told me.
And the rest of us in the room can finally breathe again.
Kimmel is all new with Octavia Spencer and Melissa McCarthy. Later tonight. Next Thursday.
Gonna get you out of here.
It's the Station Grace crossover event.
All right, I'll come back later. Bye, guys and gals.